Welcome to section 1.8. In this section, we're going to talk about how to define variables, how to measure values of variables, and we're going to talk about some challenges in measuring variables, and we're going to talk about what happens when the value, the variable you're interested in, isn't observable, but can be calculated from variables that are observable. But let's start by defining and measuring variables. So a variable is basically any quantity that can vary. I mean, that's kind of course, right? It's something that varies. And variables are measured in units. So you want to pay attention to the units that you're measuring. You always want to think about those units. So let's look at a couple of examples. So Major League Baseball collects a lot of data, and we've got a large number of variables for each player. We've got the team variable, the number of games that they've played, that's a variable. How many at bats each player has, that's a variable. How many runs they've scored, hits, doubles, triples, home runs, runs batted in, and so on. So each of these columns is a variable. The rows can also be thought of as variables too. You'll see that most of these variables are quantitative, as we said in an earlier video, except the team variable is qualitative. Now, sometimes you want to use the observable variables, what we have in these first several columns, to calculate something that is not observable in and of itself. So the classic example is batting average. The batting average is the number of hits per at bat, and that's its units, hits per at bat. So for Trey Turner here, we have 125 hits out of 479 at bats. So he has 32.322 hits per at bat, just simply by dividing. Here's another example. World of Warcraft is a role-playing game. I've never played it, but I know it's a very popular fantasy-based role-playing game that's got tons and tons of players all connecting online from all over the world. And they collect data about who is doing what in their games, primarily because they want to see if they need to make any tweaks. So what are their variables? Well, they've got two sets of variables here. First of all, they've got one set of variables they're calling the class variable. Or one variable called class, I'm sorry. These are the values, right? So one variable is class of a character. So when you join World of Warcraft, you create a character. One of the things you choose is their class, which is like what it is they do. So you can see the various values that the variable class can take. They can be a mage, they can be a hunter, they can be a priest, and so on and so forth. This is a categorical variable because the values it takes on are classes, and the way you measure them is by measuring frequencies. So here the rarest class is, what is it, Death Knight, I think that is, and the most common class is Warrior. So the World of Warcraft designers may say, well, we want to try to balance this out a little bit more, so they may issue a patch that changes the Death Knight class so it's a little bit more popular. They also have a race variable, and the values of the race variable are Blood Elf, Orc, Tauren, I don't know what that is, Troll, or Undead. I wonder if Tauren is human, I don't know. And so those are the 5 values the race variable can take, and they're measured in terms of, as before, as with class, relative frequency, because it's a categorical variable. And so you see the least popular is Tauren, the most popular is Blood Elf, so they may or may not want to issue a patch that may make some of those races that are not used as often more popular. One thing to be aware of as you're looking at data and looking at variables whose values have been collected is the difference between primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources are the best way to get data. And a primary source is really simply who originally collected the data. So the game itself may collect data, or your app may be collecting the data, or the game designers in the case of the World of Warcraft data. Government agencies for some types of data are great primary sources. For example, the Census Bureau, Bureau of Justice Statistics, and so on. Sports leagues for things like the MLB data we saw, or NBA data, or NFL data. The NCAA for college level sports data, or if you're looking at a study, the authors of the study. Any other sources that uses somebody else's data, but to say something, those are secondary sources regarding the data. In the next video, we're going to look at a couple of types of challenges that come up in defining and measuring variables.